Welcome. Let's begin with yet another interesting topic, and that's the natural resources. Now, whenever we talk about natural resources, the first thing that comes to the mind is the scenic beauty that we have, the plants, the forest, and then we think about the things that are obviously non-renewable as well as renewable in nature. Now, if we constantly work on, let's say, urbanization, industrialization, in this process we keep on depleting our natural resources, and when the natural resources are depleted at a very fast pace, definitely it would impact the environment. There would be negative things that would be associated to it. For example, global warming, increase in the sea level, submergence of the coastal areas, land pollution, air pollution. So those are some of the interrelated phenomena that we could witness. Now, coming on to some of the basic questions, if you are able to answer these questions, you are all set with the chapter, else we'll proceed forward. So let's say if all the oxygen converts into ozone, now oxygen is O2 and ozone is O3, which is the protective layer which protects us from the harmful ultraviolet radiations. We'll understand all this as we move forward with the chapter. But the idea is, if everything converts into ozone, ozone in the lower layers is poisonous and can kill organisms. Similarly, if there is no atmosphere around the earth, the temperature would increase suddenly during the day and decrease during the night. What happens when we breathe? So if we say the proportion of air, we say nearly you have a significant proportion that is nitrogen. Now, with a significant proportion that is nitrogen, if you are inhaling that, what would happen to that nitrogen which is being inhaled? So a lot of that nitrogen goes out during the process of exhalation itself with the carbon dioxide that is emitted. Now, we have examples from Mathura oil refinery, how it has been leading to yellowing of the Taj Mahal, a very, very important aspect. We talk about acid rain phenomena. We talk about greenhouse effect, and how if you have a motor vehicle which is having a kind of glasses on all the side, if it is kept in open in the sun, it becomes a kind of greenhouse. The temperature increases at a very fast rate. So those are some of the things we would discuss. Let's first talk about resources. So resources are those things from extracted from the earth, and either it could be in the form of energy which is coming from the sun. So all these resources are required for the life to take place. Now, when we talk about the living planet, which is the biosphere or the living zone, this biosphere can only be sustainable if you have interaction of three life forms that are there, and these three life forms are land, that is lithosphere, air, that is atmosphere, and water, that is hydrosphere. So water as of it constitutes 75% of the surface. Now, atmosphere covers a kind of blanket around us, and all these together, the land, air and water, where they meet, that zone is the zone where you have the biosphere that exists, or we say this is the living zone. Now, a very good question for you is, if you go on to, let's say, Darjeeling, if you go on to Shimla, you would see a lot of mosses and lichens. But if you come back to Delhi, you won't see that. Why is it so? This is so because lichens and mosses are indicators of pollution level, mainly sulfur dioxide. So in the regions of Delhi where the pollution level is very high, lichens and mosses cannot survive, and in the regions of Shimla and Darjeeling you would have ample of lichens and mosses that would be seen. Similarly, these are releasing certain chemicals which help in the breakdown of the soil, breakdown of the rocks, and lead to formation of the soil. So one of the major functions, I would say, for the lichens and mosses is breaking down the rock pieces and converting into a soil. Now, what is very important to understand here is, when we say a pioneer community, pioneer in a succession means the one that came first for the life to exist. So you have the pioneer settlements, and these pioneer communities are mainly the lichens and the mosses that are seen. Let's talk about the three elements of biosphere one by one. So the first element is air. As we know, air contains nitrogen, carbon dioxide, water vapor which varies region to region based on the amount of humidity that is present. Then there is a very good saying that in Earth we have atmosphere and therefore we have life. But what in the case of Mars and Venus? In the case of Mars and Venus, you have more than 95% of carbon dioxide, and as a result we say there cannot be any life that exists as of now. However, recently scientists have been trying to find out life at the planet Mars, because you have lot of gas which is being converted into methane at the Gale crater area, and once this is converted into methane, this methane forms the basis for the life to originate. Okay. The next is breaking down the glucose and getting the energy from it. So most of the cells, be it a prokaryotic cell or a eukaryotic cell, which we have already understood in class 8, we have the breaking down of the glucose to produce energy, and this energy is used for the day-to-day activities. Similarly, fixing of the carbon dioxide is another very important effort. Now, what happens is, what does actually green plant do? Green plant convert the carbon dioxide which they inhale or which they absorb into glucose in the presence of sunlight. So these green plants act as the fixing centers for carbon dioxide. Similarly, we also say oceans are a huge reservoir of or a huge carbon sink. Forests are another good example of carbon sink. Of recent, we have been talking about carbon sequestration, where we are trying to put down carbon into the deep soils, deep beds, so that it could convert into coal in the coming years. So those are some of the efforts that we are seeing, and those have been going on as of now. Now, the surface of the moon has no atmosphere, and the temperature can vary from minus 190 degrees Celsius to 110 degrees Celsius. So it could be too cold to too hot, and that's the variation that could be seen if there is no atmosphere that is present. Also, when you have the lakes and the water bodies, you have a lot of evaporation that takes place, and this evaporation leads to formation of clouds, as we have seen. So it could be any dust particle, any minute impurity around which these drops of water start to condense, and then this supercooled liquid is formed. This supercooled liquid leads to the formation of cloud. When these clouds are unable to stand against the force of gravity, they fall as precipitation. Now this precipitation could be rain, the most common form of it. It could be snow, it could be sleet. So there could be various variations. It could be hailstone that could be seen. So there could be various variations that could be seen. Another important aspect that we need to understand is the movement of the breeze. So breeze are the light winds that flow. Near to the coast, what happens during the daytime? During the daytime, you have land that gets heated faster than the sea. As a result, evaporation occurs from land, and to fill that space, you have winds that blow from sea. So always, if you are having a sea-facing house or a coast-facing house, what would happen? The clothes would blow towards the opposite side, and that's one of the very good ways to understand it. And then you would have this whole cycle that would be completed, and this is the sea breeze that occurs during the daytime. Vice versa happens during the night time, which is known as land breeze. So the best way to remember is sea breeze is one that flows from the sea towards the land. So that's as simple as that. Now all this movement of the air leads to diverse phenomena. The unequal heating of the land and the sea that takes place is important, and this is affected by the process of rotation of the earth, by the presence of the mountains, by the presence of the winds, and so on. The next is rain. So rain, as I said, is very, very important when you have the hot air that rises up. So this hot air rising up forms the cloud, and when cloud is unable to stand against gravity, it falls as precipitation. So you have the process of evaporation. So along with the evaporation, you also have transpiration that occurs through the plants. So evaporation from the water bodies, transpiration from the plants, together called as evapotranspiration. This goes and leads to formation of the clouds through the process of condensation. From the condensation there is precipitation that occurs, and this precipitation fills the lake bodies, water channels again. And this whole cycle is what is known as water cycle or hydrological cycle. So again, if the drops are big and heavy, they fall as rain. If there is less precipitation, it could be in the form of sleet, it could be in any other form, and most of the rainfall patterns are governed by the prevailing wind. So the prevailing wind, which we would study more in geography, are important factors to have a proper pattern of rainfall that could be chalked out. The next is, when we are talking about atmosphere, we have certain things related to it. The most important is the pollution. Now pollution is the undesirable presence of any substance that lead to impurity into the system, and this is what is known as pollution. Air pollution is commonly caused by burning of fossil fuels, traffic vehicles, combustion, industrial exhaust that is coming out, discharge from the factories. In the water streams would be water pollution, but yes, it's through the chimneys, it's air pollution. So those are some of the major anthropogenic causes, or we could say human induced causes, which lead to air pollution. Definitely there are natural causes. It could be eruption of a volcano. So that's a kind of natural disaster or a natural reason because of which you have air pollution that occurs. Whenever you have something that goes into the air, there are small suspended particles, and these would have particulate matter. This particulate matter could be 2.5, it could be 10, and it could vary with another oxides. So it could have oxides of nitrogen, it could have oxides of sulphur that could be seen. And when this smoke that's going in combines with the fog, it is called as smog. So smoke plus fog is what is smog, and this smog reduces the visibility. So in the winter months, you might have commonly heard about higher number of road accidents in the morning time, and that's because of the smog in the urban polluted areas mainly. The next is the incidences of lung diseases, respiratory problems, allergic reactions increase with the pollution. We already talked about the examples of lichens and mosses, how they are indicators of sulfur dioxide, and they are not present in the regions of Delhi, but they are present in the regions of, let's say, Shimla and Darjeeling if we look around. The next is water and its pollution. So as we said, if industry is discharging its effluents into the streams, it is water pollution. Household waste going in, industrial waste being discharged. So all these leads to water pollution. Any undesirable substance present in the water leads to water pollution. What happens over a long course of time? This leads to increase in the algal growth and causes algal bloom. As a result, you have a top layer of algae that is seen. This layer of algal bloom cuts the oxygen supply, cuts the sunlight and other necessary inputs that are required for the life below the ocean, and leads to the death of the fishes that could be seen, and this process is what is known as eutrophication. When I say water, where do we have water? Water is 75% of the globe, we could say, is water, and this is mainly seen as the capped snow. So mainly in the polar areas you have those as glaciers. Also you have a lot of underground water that is seen. Waters in the rivers, waters in the lakes and the ocean bodies. But the pure water that is available to drink is very, very less, because most of the water that we see in the ocean has higher amount of salinity. As a result, it is not considered fit or apt for drinking. So what is important to understand is, if we are adding any undesirable substance into the water, it could be fertilizers, it could be chemicals, it is leading to water pollution. However, if we are removing any desirable substance from the water, for example, dissolved oxygen if removed, it also causes a water pollution. The next important step to understand is change in the temperature, which leads to thermal pollution. Now, this leads to the death of larvae and eggs that are seen and leads to mass mortality. So, a little range of temperature change, these are okay with, but if the temperature range is very, very high, or the temperature range increases because of some reason, it leads to a very devastating influence onto the water bodies. Also, we have seen bleaching of the coral reefs, that is because of the thermal changes that are seen. So we have covered the component of atmosphere, we have covered the component of hydrosphere. The next component is lithosphere or land. The uppermost soil layer is what is humus. This is where you have most of the dead and decaying organic matter that is present, and this is one of the most fertile layers. Now with the erosion, what happens is this top layer flows off. So what we need is more plants, more vegetation that would have deeper roots, and this would bind the soil more tightly. In the case this does not happen, it would lead to loss of the most fertile soil that could be seen. Also, what happens is when the sun is heating, now sun is heating the rocks or the land, there are cracks that develop during the daytime, and there is also expansion process that takes place. Also, you have water that moves into or penetrates because of the uneven heating that is seen. It freezes when the gaps are there during the night time, and when it freezes, it expands, so the gaps further widen. And that's where we have the freeze and thaw process of weathering that we understand. The next important thing is the living organism. So earthworms, they burrow the land deep, and they are called as farmer's friend also. So they basically dig the soil and make it much more fertile. So there are various things that we need to understand. It could be in the form of nutrients, humus, the soil depth, and the various factors that affect it. We also have lots of modern day practices for the farming that are used. However, all the modern day farming practices are using mechanical instruments, and then that process, it destroys the soil organism. So the earthworms are killed into that process. Also, because of the soil pollution, there is removal of the fertile layer of the soil, there is addition of new substances that are seen, and this leads to the soil erosion. The next is the biogeochemical cycle. Now, as the name suggests, it is a cycle which is formed by interaction of the biological processes, and or I could say the biotic and the abiotic processes. So the living and the non-living processes, when they interact together to make a system much more dynamic but stable, would be called as the biogeochemical cycles. The most important is the water cycle, which we have already discussed. This water cycle is also known as the hydrological cycle. The next important cycle is a nitrogen cycle, where we say nitrogen is the most or the largest proportion of the gas that is found in the atmosphere, with nearly 78%, and it's one of the major components of, let's say, the protein that is present, the nucleic acids, the DNA. This nitrogen becomes very, very important. Now this nitrogen is fixed by nitrogen fixing bacteria. So what are those nitrogen fixing bacteria? First of all, you have ammonia, that's the nitrogen which is found, and that converts into nitrite, and this nitrite converts into nitrate. So there are two stages that we need to understand. The first stage from ammonia to nitrite is where you have nitrosomonas bacteria that helps to convert this, and the next stage from nitrite to nitrate is through the nitrobacter. Now we have the groundnuts, the roots of the groundnuts. You have the nitrogen fixing bacteria in the root nodules that are found, and this is one of the very, very important elements that we need to understand. So what happens is, the nitrogen in the atmosphere, there is fixing of the nitrogen that takes place. This fixing could be done by the green plant, it could be done by the process of nitrification, and then nitrification converting into nitrate, and nitrate, when they the denitrifying bacteria act on it, you have the nitrogen that is again released into the atmosphere. From the animals you have ammonia, and this ammonia converts into nitrite and again into nitrate. So that's one of the major process that we understand, and this process involves the land process as well as the air. So it involves the whole circulation across the various components of biosphere. Again, similar to the nitrogen cycle, we do have carbon cycle. Carbon is found in the elemental forms in, let's say, diamond, graphite, but in the combined state, if I say, it is carbon dioxide. You have various skeletons, the endoskeleton and the exoskeleton of animals, which are made up of carbonates, and therefore carbon is again very, very important. Now what happens in the process of greenhouse effect? In the greenhouse effect, the heat is trapped. So if I was talking about a motor vehicle with closed glasses in a sunlight, what would happen? It would act as a greenhouse effect. How does it happen? The heat is trapped by the glass and the temperature inside the glass increases much higher than the surrounding temperature. So artificially, these greenhouses are used to have certain vegetations which are not native to a specific area. So you have enclosures which are seen in the colder areas mainly, where plant life could originate in this greenhouses. But Earth itself is acting as a greenhouse as of now, and you have higher temperatures that are recorded. Now once you have higher temperature, it would lead to a global temperature rise or a global warming. Global warming would lead to melting of the glaciers. Melting of the glaciers would lead to higher levels of sea that would be seen, which would lead to coastal submergence. Parley 2 in Lakshadweep is one of the common examples which has recently submerged, the island that is recently submerged from India. You have a lot of places which are in the coastal areas are susceptible or are vulnerable to the submergence that could happen. If we talk about ozone, as I said, ozone is very, very important for protecting us from the harmful ultraviolet radiations. But if present in the stratosphere, if present in the lower layer, what would happen is this ozone is poisonous gas and is considered as a pollutant. It could lead to respiratory problems. It could kill a lot of organisms, and definitely, as I said, it's poisonous, it's harmful. The ozone hole is being caused because of the higher use of chlorofluorocarbons, which are CFCs, and because of the use of CFCs, what happened is we have seen the ozone hole in the region of Antarctica. In 1980s, this hole was small, but in 1990s, we have seen a significant increase. As a result, the CFC refrigerators, the CFC's usage was banned in most of the developed countries, and a cap was put for the developing nations as well. The next important thing that we need to understand is oxygen. So oxygen is important for our survival. 21% is seen as oxygen among the proportion or the composition of the total gases that are seen. So it's a kind of combined form seen in the earth crust. Also in the carbon dioxide, you do have oxygen that is seen, but this oxygen, when present as pure oxygen, is important because it helps in the process of respiration for the living organisms or the animal life to exist. And the carbon dioxide that is exhaled is used by the green plants in the process of photosynthesis for the formation of glucose. So that's how you have the necessity that both plant and animal lives coexist. And this was one of the very important topics that you need to understand. So with this, we cover our topic on natural resources. As we have covered some of the very important brain teasers, so those are very, very important. Another important set of questions from this chapter could be short notes on biogeochemical cycles, the nitrogen cycle, water cycle, oxygen, the importance of oxygen, the role of ozone in lower layers as well as the upper atmosphere. We have covered a class on ozone and ozone hole separately. So if you want to go into the details of understanding ozone, just refer that. So with this, we cover this lecture. Stay tuned for many more lectures. Have a wonderful day ahead.